We have all been there. We have all had the experience of feeling alone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what loneliness is, what purpose it serves, and how we can all take steps to alleviate it. If that's what you're here for, then watch this video. Hey guys, I'm Joyce. I am a recovered sex and love addict, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about what loneliness is and how we can recover from it. So first off, I'm going to ask you guys to pause the video. But first, I want you to think about what loneliness is to you. What does it feel like? Is it a feeling? Think about that, about what loneliness means to you. Pause the video and I'll be back with you in just a second. Did you pause yet? Come on, I need you to participate. Oh, all right, when I said pause, I did not mean for like that long. I went and got a haircut, picked up some Starbucks. Matcha pineapple, by the way. Before we get any further, type down in the comments below what that definition of loneliness is. The reason I wanted to ask you guys what loneliness is, on one hand, it does look different for everyone. On the journey to self-awareness, we need to get used to asking ourselves first for our opinion instead of looking it up first or going to a YouTube video and seeing what they think. You probably know the answer for yourself. Maybe you have trouble putting words to it, but at least you can capture that feeling and that sensation of, oh, this is what loneliness means to me. Then you'll have a more solid footing in what you believe to be true than immediately going off of what somebody else is saying. So yeah, a little tip to put in the self-awareness jar. Anyway, back to loneliness. So loneliness, I sat down and I thought to myself, it doesn't have to do with the amount of people that you're around. When I think about the most lonely times of my life, I think about feeling misunderstood, feeling disconnected, feeling that nobody really got it, where I was coming from. And also it comes out of a desperation, wanting to be validated. If somebody is truly confident in their opinion and they're super self-assured, they don't need to look for that validation elsewhere. Inherently, we are a social species. So we do look for other people to say, hey, you know what? I think you're right about that. And when people don't, it creates this sense of feeling misunderstood and feeling disconnected. I think that's why some of us feel so lonely in some of our romantic relationships. I don't expect it of my friends, I don't expect it of acquaintances, but this person is supposed to get me. They're supposed to understand me. As a former sex and love addict, feeling like this person should understand me, then realizing that they didn't really get it. Or if anything, they were the last person to really understand me, and that does hurt. And a lot of us probably do experience that in relationships, because on one hand, there's the expectation that this person is supposed to get you off the bat. On the other hand, there's the desire to be seen. Something that I realized in my journey is that loneliness, although sometimes it's an uncomfortable experience, loneliness is really just a signal. It is actually useful to lean into that. There's the whole self-care movement, treat yourself. You distract yourself from the core issue and the main problem. But the reality is, if you're not attacking the core of the problem, you're not addressing what's actually creating the issue, loneliness is just an indication that you're wanting to connect, that you do feel alone. If you're looking for connection, you have to start with connecting with yourself. And that's why, although self-care and treating yourself, all those things are great, but if you're using that as a replacement for first connecting with yourself, then the problem is just going to keep cropping up because you're not actually addressing the issue. An amazing quote that I've really carried with me along my journey: loneliness is actually you crying out for connection with yourself. I don't know where it's from, so if you've heard of this quote somewhere, please let me know in the comments below. The moments when I'm sitting and I'm feeling lonely, there's a sense of wanting to escape. There's a sense of, okay, maybe I should go for a run. Those things might make you feel better in the short term, but the reality is you're still not addressing the reason why that loneliness cropped up in the first place. When I felt that loneliness, I started leaning into it instead of trying to distract myself. And honestly, that helps to alleviate it. Even if you're at a party or you're surrounded by people, it doesn't matter because you can still feel lonely if you don't feel known and seen and you don't feel that connection. And all of that connection starts at a foundation of knowing yourself and connecting with yourself. And so what do I mean by connecting with yourself? For myself, it was things like understanding yourself, whether that's journaling, really getting my thoughts out and trying to dig into, okay, why am I feeling this way? You know, what realities am I not facing? And so one of the realities that I had to face was that maybe I don't have any genuine and authentic friendships, because I've always thought of myself as somebody who's very open, but I realized I actually really struggle with being vulnerable. And those are completely different things. If anything, openness can sometimes be used as a defense mechanism to distract from the things that really do make you feel vulnerable. So I had to face my reality, which is that, okay, I don't have a lot of very close friendships and I don't know why. And so I really had to dig into that and figure out, okay, if I'm to reject all the things that are based out of insecurity, like I'm not lovable, what is left, right? Maybe it's something that I'm doing. Like I'm not engaging in behaviors that allow me to foster genuine and healthy and authentic relationships. So that's really the first step, which is to understand yourself. And that's why I started out the episode by asking you, okay, what does loneliness look like to you? What does it feel like for you? Because the first person you need to check in with is yourself. And even though your mind is wanting to distract yourself, a lot of that is cured when you are comfortable with yourself, when you're comfortable being alone. I talk a little bit about this in my last video about how to be single and happy. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. Part of loneliness is also the level of your desire. Because if you're somebody who doesn't really require that much understanding or connection, you're not going to feel lonely as often. But if you're somebody who really does, then you're going to feel it a lot more. And so it is very important to pay attention to that feeling. First of all, knowing what it looks like for you. And when you experience it, to turn inward and to acknowledge it, to do something about it, like dig deep, instead of just saying, oh, I'm lonely, I'm going to go take a walk and forget about it. Because again, loneliness is not good or bad, it just is. It's a signal to tell you there is something going on that's not right. It's an adaptive response, it has a function. So it's important to start seeing it as not something negative or something to escape from, but something that informs you and that is useful. So that first step is knowing yourself. In order to actually develop genuine connections, you have to take what you know about yourself and you have to show yourself. Know yourself, then show yourself. Showing yourself is not openness. Showing yourself is being vulnerable. And being vulnerable requires courage. You're maybe worried about whether or not somebody could truly love that part of you. But the reality is, if you're not showing those parts of yourself, it is impossible for somebody to love you. Because whoever they're loving is not you, it's just somebody that you're showing them. It starts with knowing your true self and then choosing to intentionally connect, to be with people, to say, hey, honestly, I don't know the answers. Hey, like, I really do feel jealous when you do this. In order to show yourself, you need to know yourself. And once you do show yourself, you have to go in with zero expectations. Like that silence when you say something, you're like, man, I don't know how they're gonna take this. And you're waiting for that response and you're kind of cringing because you're like, I don't know if this is gonna go over well, but I tried my best. I'm trying to be honest, trying to show myself. And then they come back and they just crush you. To come with that humility, to say, I'm not gonna expect anything of this person. I'm gonna extend my hand out in vulnerability because this is what I've chosen to do. And I've done it because it requires me to step out in courage and say, you know what? I hope they meet me, but if they don't, I need to ask myself two questions. First of all, are they responding in a way I just don't receive, right? Like what if they're saying, hey, no, not tonight, but maybe next week and I hear, yeah, like I don't really want to hang out with you and I'll get back to you next week, but like not really. Like, what are you hearing? You know, what are they actually saying? What are you hearing? Are you interpreting it as rejection when they haven't actually rejected you yet? The second question is, what expectations did I have for this person before I extended my hand in vulnerability? Did I expect and did I almost require them to receive it? Right? Like, you don't give them room to say no. And the reality is, people say no usually because of their own boundaries. Being able to hear their no, to hear what their needs are, you realize it's really not that much to do with you and your desire to connect, but it has everything to do with them and what they need in that moment. A lot of people who experience loneliness, they might try to reach out, they might try to be vulnerable, and when people shut them down, they give up. And then they become jaded and they become cynical. They look at the world and say, hey, nobody wants genuine connection. Everybody's out to hurt me. Everybody's out to use me. And then you stop opening up. You stop creating opportunities to be seen and to be loved. And then the result is that you become more and more lonely. You want to get to a place of self-sufficiency, that when you are feeling lonely, you are taking the first step to connect with yourself. And oftentimes, a lot of that loneliness just melts away. Also having to check your expectations. What are the moments in which I feel incredibly vulnerable? And what are the expectations that I have going into those moments? If they don't respond positively, or in the way that we want them to, then the result is like resentment and anger and lashing out and being like, man, I thought you were my friend. I thought you were my homie. Like, why are you not there for me? And the reality is there's probably a lot of people there for you, just not in the way that you want or the way that you need. That's a tough place to be in. But also we have to take responsibility for getting our needs met and realizing that, hey, I know I tried and I know I got hurt, but that doesn't mean I just give up. Loneliness, which is very similar to something like resentment or shame. A lot of those things are built on the habits that you've developed over time. Maybe you did feel extremely lonely growing up as a kid, and your response was always to play video games, or your response was always to call your little boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. You found your escape, you found your alleviation in that. That was your coping mechanism, and that's how you escaped. And so if that's what you've always done, that's what you continue to do. And you feel like, man, there's no other way. Like, how do I deal with it? Realizing that you have to do something different in order to get different results. So if you want to stop feeling lonely, you have to figure out, okay, where's the core of the issue? How have I tended to alleviate that loneliness in the past? What was that coping mechanism? And then consciously choose to not do those things, to sit with that discomfort, to observe it, and be curious about it and not judge it. Realize that, hey, if I change what I'm doing, the results will be different. And often it does feel like out of our control, where we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm lonely because there's just something inherently wrong with me. And that's a terrifying place to be because you feel like you can't do anything about it. You feel powerless to change. But realizing that you have to remain open, no matter how many times you've gotten hurt, I'm telling you that it is within your control. Loneliness is a very complex emotion. It's an emotion that results from habits that are not built in a day. So in order to unravel those habits, you have to take time and think about how long it took you to build those habits up. It's probably going to take equally as long to really address those habits and to start taking those things apart, to examine and see, okay, what is creating the issue and what do I really need to take with me into the future? Because there isn't a quick fix to something as complex as loneliness. It often gets worse before it gets better because you feel like, man, if I address loneliness, then I have to go deeper and deeper into all these layers and really face the darkest parts of myself. Yes, that's what it takes. It is not as scary as it seems. It is so worth it to get to that other side. When you wake up and you feel like, man, I have so much to give because I have so much gratitude for the people in my life, and I show up a lot more even when I'm afraid to rebuild the foundation of who you are. I'm telling you, that is worth it. And not everybody can take that journey or decides to take that journey, and that's completely okay. But just know, in some ways you'll always be walking in oblivion. You'll always be walking in the dark. You might always be solving the wrong problem and always be experiencing depression, loneliness, resentment, anger, cynicism, jadedness. There are all these things that are not built in a day. If you made it to the end of this video, then I'm guessing that some part of it resonated with you. If that's the case, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like. I'll be releasing content like this every single week because I want to be able to support your journey, and also for myself to continue growing along this process and also to help people along the way. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week.